you.
Okay.
Am I good? Okay. According to Christine Starteschi, author of Mass Murder in the United States, the Zodiac Killer is the oldest unsolved serial murder in the US. And now, overwhelming fascination with serial killers has kind of swept our society. Think of the podcast series, the Netflix shows, the television shows that we see everywhere. And I'm one of those people. From a young age, I was watching shows such as CSI, Law & Order SVU, Unsolved Mysteries, Criminal Minds, and even today, I love listening to podcasts about serial killers. And I've spent years learning about true crime. And because I'm from California, the one that has always intrigued me the most is the Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer's unusual case is a good starting point to jump into serial killer history. So today I'm going to discuss a general overview of the Zodiac, the victims, the letters, and some top suspects. So to begin, I'm just going to go through a brief overview of the Zodiac Killer. So the Zodiac Killer was known as a serial killer. His killings began in roughly 1966, killing mostly couples. There's some serious debate about the first victim, though. There were 2 letters sent to the police and the victim's father claiming credit, and the thing that makes this stand out is that it was a singular murder, so a lot of people speculate that this was actually not the Zodiac Killer, but they're uncertain. The other tentative first murder victims were actually murdered in December of 1968, and again, he claimed credit for these as well. So he started roughly 66 to 68. The murders took place in the San Francisco Bay Area, which I'm actually visiting in 2 weeks, so I'm gonna look for them. And they took place in Vallejo mostly, which is up here. And then you can see that downtown San Francisco is here. And there was actually a murder that happened in Presidio Heights in downtown San Francisco as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of where he was. And I'm actually from a town down here, so not too far from the Zodiac Killer. So some of the places it took that the murders happened were in Lake Berryessa, which is actually up near Vallejo, along with the Blue Rock Springs Golf Club and Lake Herman Road, which are all pretty well known in the San Francisco area. The victims were shot and or stabbed when they were murdered, so it's not like they were killed in extreme ways. They were pretty standard in terms of murders, which is funny to say, but they are. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the victims so that we can get a little bit of flavor about them. So while the Zodiac Killer claimed that he killed 37 people, there were only 5 victims that are attributed to him and 2 survivors. So the first couple that was killed was 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Faraday on the outskirts of Vallejo, California on December 20th in 1968. They were shot to death outside of their car. Police were really baffled by it because they didn't see a motive for the killing. The next couple that were hunted down by the Zodiac Killer were Darlene Farron and Michael Maggiow, who was actually wounded, and that was also in Vallejo, California on July 4th, 1969. They were approached by a man with a flashlight who then fired multiple shots at them. The Zodiac Killer himself actually called into the police and told them about the murder an hour later, and also stated that he had killed Betty Lou and David, the other couple from earlier. Michael actually survived and was able to give a pretty detailed description of the killer, but little progress was made in the case. The next couple was Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell at Lake Berryessa on September 27th, 1969. They were approached by a man wearing a hood and a shirt bearing a circle cross symbol, and he tied them up before brutally stabbing them. And then he scrawled a message on the door of the Volkswagen for the police, again, and then called to claim responsibility, which Brian actually survived as well from that attack and gave more of a detailed description. And he's still alive today. The final victim, or so we think, is Paul Stein, and he was a cab driver in San Francisco, and this one actually took place in October of 1969, so about a month after Cecilia and Brian's. It didn't seem to fit his profile because it was a singular victim, it wasn't a couple, and police actually deemed it a robbery until 3 days later when the Zodiac sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle with a bloody scrap of Stein's shirt. Eyewitnesses also happened to give a description to the dispatcher, but because of confusions on race, the police missed him at the scene and he taunted them later for it. So in order to get a full scope on the killer, we actually need to move on to the letters because those are the most intriguing part of the case. So while the victims are relatively standard, these are what really make the Zodiac Killer stand out. The first letter was received by 3 San Francisco area newspapers on August 1st, 1969. The first letter were handwritten letters that claimed responsibility for the first set of killings. They were also contained a cipher, a 3-part cipher that claimed to reveal the Zodiac Killer's identity. And he threatened to kill more if the letter wasn't posted on the front page of the newspapers on the next Friday night. And all of them actually closed with a circle cross symbol that you can see here, along with the cipher that was sent. This cipher is actually from the second set of letters and was never cracked. So it's still not cracked today. So several days later, another newspaper received another letter, and this one was actually taunting the police for not figuring out the cipher and finding out who he was. He actually really loved to do that to them. And it detailed the murders again in a way that could have only been known by the killer. A few days after that, actually, a high school teacher and his wife cracked the code, but all it really was a rant about how much the Zodiac Killer loved killing. So didn't really help them much on that one. And then, a few days after the murder of Paul Stein, the letter was received by the Chronicle that contained the scrap, which helped to refute that robbery theory that had initially been laid out by the police. And he continued writing letters to the police and newspapers with ciphers and clues until about 1974, and then suddenly stopped. So that was the last they heard of him. There were a lot more letters that they received, but they all claimed that they were not actually from the Zodiac. So lastly, I'm going to look at a few top suspects. So there were a lot of suspects for the Zodiac Killer, and there still are, because it's not solved. But I'm going to look at 2 main ones. The first one is Arthur Lee Allen. He actually called himself the Zodiac around his friends, which is kind of creepy, before the killings, and he mentioned thoughts of murdering on a hunting trip, but specifically murdering humans and not animals. He owned a Zodiac brand watch, and he fit the height and weight description, and he went to jail in 1974. But DNA from saliva found on one of the envelopes did not match him. So it's hard to know if it was actually him. The second one is Earl Van Best Jr. He was discovered by his estranged son. He matched his father's handwriting to the Zodiac. His father had a violent past, and he looked shockingly like the sketch of the Zodiac Killer. So there's a little picture for you of that. But even though there's all these conspiracy theories, he was never actually caught. So I'm going to wrap up what we've gone through a little bit. So the Zodiac Killer was a serial killer that terrorized the San Francisco area. While he claimed 37 victims, there are 5 that are credited to him in certainty. The letters are what really make this case stand out, and there are many suspects, but none were ever charged. The Zodiac Killer's unusual case is a good starting point to jump into serial killer history, and I hope that by learning a little bit about the Zodiac Killer, you have a better understanding of the serial killer intrigue.